BeatVince.com. We are here today with the one and only legendary broadcaster, Bill Mercer. Bill, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and it's good to be here with you.
Well,
another fellow broadcaster.
There you go. I'm not anywhere in your category, so let's not muddy the waters. And then we've got Mickey Grant behind the camera, so every once in a while Mickey may chime in with some extra information.
Or fall off the stool.
Or fall off the stool. We don't know which. But
I've known him about 50 years, and he's never changed.
Well, that's good. At least you know what to expect, right?
That's right. You have to.
With all your years of play-by-play announcing, and whether it was wrestling, which for the purpose of this show we'll talk about more than anything, but also football, baseball, all of those things, what would you say to a up-and-coming or a broadcaster looking to get started doing play-by-play? What are some of the most important things that they need to do and that they need to learn?
Well, let's take football first. Football is a symmetrical deal. You always have a place that the play starts, so you know where you're going to be, and then you run the play left or right or up the field. Basketball is a continuous operation, which just keeps you busy. You try to locate the people on the court. So those two are different. Baseball is my all-time favorite, and it is kind of like human relationships. It's individuals and playing together, and things happen with the individuals. And everything starts with the pitcher and the batter and the catcher, and then emanates out from there. Ground ball is second, over to first, those things. So there are places where, except for basketball, basketball you tip it off, and that's the beginning, and it goes from there. The other sports that I didn't do, I can't comment on. But each sport has a start and a pretty much a progression that will go with it, only but with it. Baseball has their progression. It's different from football. Football has its progression, different than basketball. So you have to learn about each sport and the way plays start and how they evolve and how they go. Right, left, in football, second base, third base, outfield in baseball. And basketball is up and down the court and shoot. Now there's wrestling. And it is totally and absolutely different than any others because there are no parameters except the ring. I first did wrestling, in my first radio job in Oklahoma, and I'd seen it on TV, but I'd never been there and I didn't know much about it. But the guy said, well, you can do the other sports, you can do this. And that's true in a way. But what I had to do was research with a couple of wrestlers who were down at the city hall before the match and write down what each play looked like on a legal pad. And then I stayed a little behind during the match and checked all my little notes until I got used to the toe hold or the step over thing or hammerlock or all those things. So you get to know those and you know the determination. And that's the substance of wrestling. There are locks and holes, and then there's some you don't know that suddenly pop up. But you have to expect that certain holes will be used and others will come up that you haven't seen. And that's good because you need a surprise every now and then.
Sure.
Yeah. I remember, Bill, you would make up sometime.
Holes? Oh, of course, if I didn't know what it was. And it didn't make any difference because the fans didn't understand. They thought I knew everything. So, after a while, they thought, well, he knows everything. That must be something. And I would tell the rest of them I had made up a hole, and they'd laugh and say, well, it's probably as good as our description of it. But that didn't happen every time. So that is where they're all alike in the fact that you've got to do research for each sport. You've got to know the players. You've got to know a lot about the sport itself. and then how it functions. Wrestling, again, is a different animal. If I just go on, it'd be okay. I noticed that when I first did play-by-play on radio, and I did it later too on radio, that the way I was following it was much like following boxing, because there's this motion and throwing punches and that. So the same sort of thing is true in wrestling a bit, boxing and wrestling. But wrestling takes it farther, and guys get thrown, people get thrown around the ring, out of the ring, and so there's more action to follow it, and you just follow it. And I decided, I didn't know exactly how, I'd never heard a professional wrestling bout on the air, on TV in those days. And I said, well, I'm just going to do it like radio, like I do radio, with a bit more personality involved. And that's how I decided to follow it, and I did that. I also am one who believes that there are two teams in a baseball game, there are two teams, football game, etc. There are at least two adversaries in wrestling. Now, I've noticed some wrestling announcers I've now heard later on in life who yell and scream about our guy, this guy's our guy, and I thought, and then he would say very little about the other, the opponent. And I thought, okay, if you want to be a homer and it's good for the promoter and he wants it, that's fine. I don't believe in homers in football or baseball or anything. I give equal relationship to the opponent as well as the local person. So that was the beginning of how I sort of worked my way into the idea that I knew I had to talk quite a bit about them in the ring running around and not hitting each other or something. But when it got down to contact and all that, I was concerned about how I did the guy with a hole and the other guy and how he was reacting. That's basically how I decided to have my style, which was probably different than any other wrestling program in the country.
Well, most of those programs, what it seemed like was the play-by-play guy was the homer for the baby face,
That's
and the
right.
color guy was the homer for the heel.
Well, I never had a color guy.
And so, well, let me ask: did you like doing it solo? Did you prefer
Yeah.
that, or was that just how it
I
was?
preferred it. I'm crazy like a lot of announcers. I prefer to do baseball alone. My friends who are in it still, he loves to do it by himself. It's very difficult, and this is getting away from it a little bit. I always found it difficult to find a color announcer or analyst who could see the thing, tell me what happened, and get out of the way.
Right.
Most of them, and in TV today, oh my Lord, talking is the only thing they know how to do. And forget the game. Talk basketball, just talk over shots, talk over this, talk over it. There's a game going on. And I don't want to hear you talking about when you were with the Cubs and you hit a home run. That's good for you, but stay in the game. Stay in the baseball game. Stay in the football game. Analyze it. I did color one time in another football kind of thing. My whole idea was I watched the line, and when the play ran, I picked out the guys who pulled and blocked because they never mentioned them.
Right.
And so after the play was over, I mentioned, hey, Joe Blow at right tackle pulled. He let the run right in until the tight end picked it up. And now that is simple, but that's what it is. It's simple. The guy pulls and he leads. That's his job. So give him some credit.
Sure.
But you don't hear that anymore much.
No.
So that I've had a couple of good analysts. Well, I had Blackie Sheridan, who was a great writer and columnist, doing color with me for a while. And then Vern Lundquist, who became a
Yeah.
great basketball
Oh, yeah.
announcer, he was with me with the Cowboys the last 3 years, and he was very good at that. He respected the fact that he had time, he had a frame, and I have a frame, and that's what these guys just talk over everything. So, yeah, I'm a little bit prejudiced against
Sure.
the average color guy.
Well, and I think that's a lot of things that those guys try to either say too much or try to talk about themselves or what have you and not focus on why they're there.
Or they don't know what the heck to say.
Right, so they just start talking.
Yeah.
And the other thing, like Mickey and I have talked about, is the fact that the show or the game, or depending on what you're calling
Yeah.
it, is the star and is the content, and
That's right.
and the play-by-play or color is there to facilitate that and to enhance that, not to be in
We're
the
not
limelight.
The stars. The announcer is not the star. He cannot have any way of controlling the play or controlling the game. He can say, and these guys that, well, he should do this, and he should have done that. Well, he played maybe, but he knows he can't be sure that anybody, if he were out there, he would have done that.
Right.
But this is a kind of an ego thing. You know, I would have done this, and I think it would have worked a lot better than what he did, even though he picked up 5 yards. Now, that just, I just get angry about it.
Sure, and I don't know how much, probably not much wrestling that you watch today, or
I don't ever watch it.
what you have seen. that's a lot of people out there, really. But that's just kind of it's a lost art, I guess, to actually just call the action as opposed to just be talking for no reason.
Yeah, and you know, there's a storyline there in every bout. And one of the storylines is this guy is challenging, say, one of the Von Erichs. And the winner will move on and challenge the champion when he comes in. So now I could be pulling for the Von Erich, naturally, because I knew him, they were friends. But in a contest, whatever this guy that's trying to challenge him, I got to give him credit for how hard he tries to do it.
Sure.
And when they really get into this thing and there's contact and there's obvious great interest in winning, whether it's the guy that's not going to win or the guy that is going to win, it's a lot of fun, and to see how they try to put on this great show, or not necessarily put it on, just do it. That's what they're there for, to do it and excite the fans. But the announcer has no control over who wins or loses. He doesn't have to scream and holler and encourage the fans to scream and holler with him. They can do that on their own. If they see it, they're going to react to it.
Did you ever want to know, or did you ever know what was going on
No,
beforehand?
they told me, hey, we have a meeting before this, so you can know what's going to happen. I said, I'm not coming. I don't know what's going to happen in a football game.
Right.
I don't know what's happening in a baseball game. I don't want to know what the tick is that this is going to end and he's going to win. That's like I've never seen it before. I want to. Those guys are doing something I just don't have any idea how it's going to turn out, and that was true. I didn't know how the good guy was going to beat the bad guy or vice versa. So I didn't want to know that, because my reaction time. Now I reacted. I didn't blow my skull, but I would react to it. Man, that was you know. But I know I never wanted to know how that was going to happen. And of course, we all know something's going to happen the way they want it to.
Right. Do you think that natural, spontaneous reaction happened more so when you were doing, especially with the World Class show in the 80s?
Oh,
But now that everything is more scripted, and I would imagine that most all the announcers know all the outcomes, that actually just inherently makes it less exciting and interesting through their eyes.
And there's no real storyline there. It's all slam bang, videos, visual stuff, throwing guys across the ring into the first row, and we had that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the main feature of it. It would happen sometimes accidentally. I remember Kevin Von Erich was in the corner, and the other wrestler who was a good guy and turned bad guy picked up a chair and started to act like he was going to hit, and Kevin's kind of moved, and the chair hit him in the back of the head, and he started gushing blood and ran down the ring onto my desk. And you don't say, well, that's real blood.
Right.
He really got bloodied on that blow. I'm sure the other wrestler maybe didn't intend to hit him that hard, but he really bashed him, and Kevin is bleeding badly. Now that describes it, but it doesn't say, oh, he was supposed to hit him.
Right. Like, oops, there was a
Yeah, it was an accident. Yeah.
So that obviously some of those unforeseen things obviously were spontaneous as well. That kind of helped, and obviously if you didn't know, made it. I guess the problem is now is that things aren't kayfabed, or they aren't seen as real. So that's why there's this lack of actual competition, like you said earlier about basically treating it just like you would a football game or a basketball game.
Sure. You're doing a football game, and they're moving down the field, and they're hitting this and this, and they're getting ready to score from the 5-yard line, and there's an interception. And here they've been driving 60 yards, and right there where they're going to score, the guy somehow gets his arm hit, or he does something, and the ball flies out. It's intercepted, and that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
That's a change of pace, and that's where good God, I'm glad I don't know when there's going to be an interception.
Yeah.
And that's what an announcer should do. He lives on what he doesn't know, and then sees it and reacts appropriately.
I was watching something actually earlier this morning that you had somebody had done a piece on you, and you had talked about a kid who would take a radio to a ball field, and that he would explain. He told you later that basically the picture that you painted, that he was blind, and that he could actually see the game because of how the words came together.
That's right.
How important do you think it was for you to start off in radio to as it lends to your world-class days of TV announcing?
All the difference in the world. I learned how to paint a picture to the audience who couldn't see the picture. Mm-hmm. I learned how to describe carefully people and individuals. That young man who did that, well, I was thinking at the time, well, I don't know, maybe I should get into something else. Maybe I was doing baseball. And when he said, and I take your radio to Burnett Field, and I listen to you, and I can see the whole play, even though I'm blind, I said, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what I know I've got to do.
That's the greatest compliment you could get.
That's oh man, and I was young in the business, and I said, that's it, because radio has been the backbone of our communications for 100 years. And we've told people and explained to people and described for people World Series, the greatest adventures of all, all this. And so, yeah, that's what I have to do. I have to be sure the people who can't see the action see it. And if later then I moved into television and realized, okay, now I'm a little different, so I don't have to relate the obvious fact, but I have to, at the same time, describe the obvious in a different way.
Sure.
And yeah, I think radio that's what I told my students when I taught. I said, we're not going to touch television. It's out there. You could watch it. You could practice on it. But I want you to think radio. I want you to think how you describe it, and in detail, in minute detail, in a colorful way. And that's the way they did it, and they were all very successful, most of them.
and wrestling has changed. Just the style of wrestling, as you alluded to a little
Yeah.
bit earlier, with all the action and the all the high spots, as they would say.
Yeah.
The one thing, that you had the opportunity when it was a little slower paced, when they would grab a hold or have a headlock and work on a submission for a few minutes,
Yeah.
for you to expand on stories and really be more of a storyteller as for more than just a action caller.
Well, yeah, you tell stories about other wrestlers you've seen and how they did that. I mean, it comes, and actually, if you want to, you can make up something. I saw Gorgeous George do that, and one time when he was here at the Sportatorium, he held a headlock for about 5 minutes on this guy, and I'm sure his ears rung when he finally let go. But
Yeah.
you could do that, and probably Gorgeous George did. I don't know, but you're not lying to people because everybody runs that way.
Mm-hmm.
What I think was the greatest thing that they did was get rid of the 2 out of 3 falls.
Yeah.
That was just. It took all evening to do, and then invariably they'd get down in 2 falls, and then the third ran out of time, or it was non-decision. Now it's 1 fall, 30-minute time limit, or 20-minute, whatever, and that picks up the pace. They have to work harder. They can't hold on for long. And back in the old days, I was told that they'd hold headlocks for 10 minutes.
Right.
And just hoping the guy would get so goofy that he couldn't handle anything after that. But you didn't have anything going on.
Right.
And so they picked up the pace. And in our era of world class, I thought we had everything was paced great. Everybody had a reason for being there, and they all functioned well. There were some bouts that were just as exciting